Hi there, and welcome to the Engineering Influence podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies. My name is Allison Schneider with ACEC, and I'm joined by Anthony Fasano with the Engineering Management Institute. Thanks for being on, Anthony.
Thanks for having me, Allison. I'm excited to be here.
So we are going to talk about project management and how engineers can move into the management side of things and build their skills on that side. Talk a little bit about how you came into this role.
Sure. So I have a undergraduate degree and a master's degree in civil engineering. I'm also a licensed professional engineer, and I started working for a very reputable consulting firm when I graduated from college way back when. And I wanted to become a partner, principal, leader in the company, like I think a lot of engineering professionals do. And when I looked at the leaders in the organization, it was pretty clear to me that they weren't just technically savvy. They had communication skills. They could lead projects, they could lead people, they could do business development. And so I knew I needed to build those skill sets. The challenge was the company didn't really have a lot of resources for that, not a lot of training, not a lot of tools to help me with those skill sets. So I just tried to learn on my own. I read books, I watched videos, I took courses, and my skills really started to ramp up and I started to grow in the organization. And one day my boss came up to me and said, "Hey, we like what you're doing. Could you go around to the other offices and do like some lunch and learns and teach some of the other professionals?" My first answer was no, because I'm an engineer. I'm not a trainer. But eventually I convinced myself to put together a curriculum and go around to the offices and help them with some of their soft skills. And it really worked with the HR department. We built a pretty robust program that we gave there for about a year. And then at that point, I just said to myself, if there's this many professionals in one mid-sized firm that struggle with these skill sets, I can only imagine that there are thousands of them out there beyond this company. And so that's about 15 years ago when I decided to kind of leave my engineering career behind and start the Engineering Management Institute, or EMI, where that's our focus. We really help AEC professionals become better project managers and better leaders, and we do it through a lot of free content. We have actually 10 active podcasts and 3 YouTube channels with tons of information because I wanted it to be available for engineers because it wasn't available for me. And then we also do custom corporate programs where we work with both public and private organizations on really helping their professionals become better leaders and better project managers.
So for engineers who are thinking about moving into a management role, what are some of the things that they can do to make that transition easier?
So I think one important distinction for engineers to understand is that there's 2 aspects of management. There's the project management side of it, which is your tasks and your project activities and your scoping and your scheduling and your budgeting. But then there's the people leadership side of it, right? So there's kind of 2 sides of it. So you need to be good at managing tasks or managing projects, but also leading people, communicating with people. So I think one thing you need to do is just kind of wrap your head around that and understand, like, how can I improve these different skill sets that I'm going to need to be a dynamic, kind of well-rounded, engineering leader. And I think anything that you can do, Allison, to build those skill sets is important. And that can be volunteering for things. That could be volunteering in your community, right? Being like a coach for your kids, speaking at your church, like getting yourself out there and speaking, mentoring within your organization, right? Anything that you can do that mimics like leadership management activities is going to help you. And the earlier you can start that in your career, the better, because it's just not something that's taught to us in school. And we don't really have a lot of exposure to it until we kind of get thrown into it. The one kind of analogy that I like to use, which I think is kind of silly but funny, is that it'd be like if you went up to an engineer and you said to them, "Hey, congratulations, you're going to be working on this project for us in Spain. We're going to send you over there tomorrow. Don't worry about it. We'll teach you Spanish in the next few months," right? It's kind of like that's what happens to engineers. It's like, "Congratulations, you're a manager, you're a project manager. We'll get you some training in the next few months, but kind of get going." So you kind of need to prepare yourself wherever you can, through volunteer work, through mentoring, through other opportunities in your community to help you build some of these softer skills.
That's such a good point. You talk about moving to the management role first and then needing to learn these skills. I imagine that if you start building these skills before those promotions, that also makes you more attractive as a candidate to move up the ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're going to stand out. And the reason you're going to stand out is because most technical professionals don't have these skill sets, right? So it's a big leverage point. It's one of those areas where I tell people all the time, if you can become a great speaker, a great communicator, you will differentiate yourself, because most technical professionals just aren't there, or they're not there early in their careers because we don't get that type of training. We don't have that type of exposure. So if you're out there and you're thinking, really want to be a manager, I really want to stand out, start building those soft skills today. Invest in a course yourself, right? Join like a Toastmasters locally. Do something to get you out there, because you'll really stand out amongst other people if you do.
What do you think are some of the most common misconceptions you find among engineers when it comes to management skills?
It kind of goes back to what I said earlier. I think they underestimate the importance of interacting with people effectively, right? People skills, people interaction. I think their mind jumps to more of the task management. I can scope a project, I can schedule a project, I can run project meetings, but you're going to need to really interact with people. That's people internally that you're going to lead, that you're going to manage, other disciplines in your organization that you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to deal with stakeholders on your projects, like citizens, the public, going to public meetings. You're, of course, going to have to deal with your client, which could be a private client. It could be a public agency, right? So I think that we really underestimate the value of being able to communicate and interact with other people as engineering professionals, because it just gets very downplayed. Like even the term project management, which gets thrown around all the time, just doesn't have the word people in it, right? That's like one of the big misconceptions about it.
Exactly.
So,
and that's one of the things we find here at the American Council of Engineering Companies. When we talk about these projects, when we celebrate these projects, it's often on the technical side. And one of the things that we try and do is bring in that people side, that community side. It's a new intersection that makes things safer. But what does that mean for the community? How does that impact people on a day-to-day basis? So I think you're spot on with the need to recognize all of the stakeholders that are involved in these projects beyond the technical side of things. What are some of the key soft skills you think every engineer should develop?
So before I talk about the skills, I think a backdrop for the skills that's really important is just confidence, right? I mean, you can teach someone all these different skill sets, but if they're not confident in their abilities, it's hard for them to go out there and practice them and use those skills. So one thing I would say to engineers is you need to build your confidence, which goes a little bit back to what I said before, like volunteering, getting up in front of rooms wherever you can. And that's why it leads me, when you talk about skills, I think the most important skill is probably public speaking. Now, you may never have to speak in public, or you may never have to get up in front of a big audience, but if you can do that, it really helps you with your communication skills. It really helps you with your confidence, right? It helps you in leadership capacity because you're kind of leading, you're in front of a room, And the one thing I would say about that too is you might have a conversation or a meeting with two people, and it's still kind of public speaking in a sense if you're presenting something to them, right? So my main advice that I give to engineers all the time is, if you only could invest in one skill, I would invest in public speaking, because number one, it's going to help you be more confident. Number two, it's going to improve your communication skills. And number three, it's going to help you to interact with people like I've been talking about this whole time. It's kind of all these things wrapped up into that one skill. And I think a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't really do a lot of public speaking, so they discount it. But I think it's not something you want to discount, because it will really help you in all avenues of really your career and life in general, just helping you with those communication skills.
Even those one-on-one conversations, when you're approaching it as somebody who's had a little bit of communications training, you're considering what the audience is thinking. What questions are they going to have? So you can kind of head those off at the pass. It may sound funny to say, but it sounds like there's a storytelling component to this too, when you're trying to get buy-in for a project or communicate to a client about changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to anticipate what they may be considering.
Yeah, you need to anticipate what are their concerns about the project, right? So you can try to alleviate those concerns. And I think also you want to be able to kind of, like, to your point, tell the story of like what are the benefits that this project is driving, right? Like if you're up in front of a planning board, you're going to have people there in the audience that may be against your project unless you can persuade them otherwise, right? Like they may see this big pond that they don't want in their community, but you may say this is preventing flooding from your community, right? So like you need to be able to communicate those things. And I think on the flip side too, because I know a lot of your listeners are like leaders in organizations, also thinking about how you're going to develop your leaders, right? Not just the individual side of it. And I think that's a tricky thing because, again, like I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of kind of programs for companies. And again, I think a lot of people maybe miss the people skills side of it, right? So you may have a project management training program that you're giving internally or whatever the case may be. But when we build these programs, we always try to integrate the project management side of it, like the 5 process groups and all that stuff, but then the people side of it, right? So how can you communicate scope creep to a client? How are you going to ask for extra funds or fee on a project, right? How are you going to let the client know that the project got off schedule, right? Because that's inevitably going to happen. So I think if you're also preparing leaders in your organization, you need to think about how you can help them to be well-rounded and focus on the project management and the people leadership side of things and maybe integrate those.
And our members are firms of all different sizes. We've got big firms, small firms. Do you think this is something that can be applied no matter the size of the firm?
100%. In fact, one of the things that I have that I've just worked on that I've just finished is a book that I'm going to be coming out with in a few months here called Beyond PM Training, How to Build a Scalable AEC Project Management Ecosystem. And I mention that here because it goes to what we're talking about is if you want to develop project managers and you want to develop leaders, it's not just doing a quote unquote training, right? You have to go beyond that. There needs to be mentoring. You have to think about onboarding. There's tools and templates that are involved, right? There's a lot of different aspects of it. So when you are thinking about that at a larger organization, it's even harder because you're trying to drive consistency across more locations, right? Mm-hmm. We're just starting a project now where we're going to do a training program for about 400 project managers in a DOT, so a big public agency, right? Which is another challenge as well in different ways. So I think the key thing is you need to have a good project management philosophy for your organization, right? And then you have to figure out how can you drip that out throughout the entire organization over a large number of people. And I think the ways you do that is you think about, do we have a good onboarding process in place? If we hire a PM tomorrow, how do we get them going? How do we show them our way of managing projects, right? Do you have a mentoring avenue, right? Like maybe we take a senior PM with every new PM and they get to meet with them a couple times and they get to mentor them a little bit. Do you have really good tools and templates? So for example, if you're trying to do a cost estimate for a project, is someone in the Florida office using the same template as someone in the California office, or they're using totally different templates, right? Now, sometimes projects and clients have specific templates, but you can get a pretty good general templates across your process groups that can really help drive consistency across your leadership. And I think that that's really important. And then your program. Right? A lot of times people will put on like a PM boot camp type of program where it's a one-day thing, and it's really difficult for PMs. I know for me, I had a lot of trouble with this. This is why one of the reasons I started EMI is because I would go to the boot camp type of trainings, and it's great information. But to take it all in 8 hours or 2 days and then you get sucked back into your projects, you never get to really look at it or digest it or implement it. So our recommendation for companies out there is to try to build programs. We try to build programs that are spaced out, Allison. So you learn something, you apply it, then you come back for the next session and you spread things out. And also don't try to jam everything into one program, right? Like we like to build a foundations program for project managers. Then we have an advanced program. There may be an intermediate program in between. You have to think about whether it's leadership or project management. You have to think about the progression of someone, right? When they're a new leader, they have different challenges and different needs for skill sets than when they're a senior leader. And so like if you have that progression mapped out, you can help them at every aspect of that progression. And that's why I didn't mention it earlier, but another part of that ecosystem should be your career paths in your organization. So again, just trying to answer from both the side of the individual and the company, there's lots of things that go into leadership development. It's probably more than just a course.
I was thinking about that as you were saying it. It's not something that you check off. It's not something you cross that off the list. I took the communications class. Now back to my daily program. It needs to be part of the daily integration and to build on it, because it's not something that you can learn in a day, and you've got to have those opportunities to implement it. I'm also thinking about the leadership in these firms. If they make it a priority, then they set the tone for how others look at the importance of having these soft skills. If they are prioritizing it and pointing to it as something that's necessary, I think that helps engineers who are progressing see it not as something they have to do, but as something they get to do, a skill that they get to add to their toolbox.
That's 100% right. And one example of that I'll give you, which is really important. We have a leadership program for people skills, right? It's 2 levels, level 1 and level 2. So when a company hires us to run it, the first thing we tell them is, we want your senior leaders to go through level 1 first, the basic program. And their answer might be like, well, they're kind of advanced. They may not need that. And my response to them is, number 1, they're probably not as advanced as you think, number 1, but they're not going to tell you that. But number 2, to your point, if they don't see what we're going to teach the younger leaders, how can they instill it? How can they mentor them on it, right? How can they lead by example on it? Because if they're not doing it, then you're going to send a bunch of younger leaders to this level 1 program, and it's never really going to be reinforced by their leaders and their mentors, right? So I think you're right. I think it's more of a training. It's more of a culture than a training program that has to be exhibited by all the leadership and all the project managers in your organization. And you need to try to do whatever you can to make sure that happens. Other things that I've seen companies do is maybe they won't go through the whole leadership program, but there's like a crash course for the managers of the participants so that they know what their teams are learning so they can reinforce it. And that's a huge part of learning and development, is reinforcing what's been taught after the fact. And that usually falls on the shoulders of the managers. Not even if you hire an external training company, they're not there with you after the program. They can't reinforce it necessarily. So that's something that is really important. Are your leaders bought in to what you're trying to do? And are they willing to reinforce it and mentor these skill sets?
And at a time where we have a shortage of engineers, and I know that is heavy on the minds of these senior leaders, this is a good time to be investing in the workforce that you have and setting that course for succession planning. 100%.
And in fact, the one thing that I talk a little bit about in the book is project management is almost like the holy grail of like sustainable growth for AEC firms. And the reason for that is multiple reasons. Number 1, most engineering professionals, they want to become project managers. Like when they look at their career, the first thing they'll do typically is they get their license about 4 years out of school, right? After that, it's like project management, right? That's like my goal, right? So if you're able to provide that avenue to them, that's very attractive to people. If you're hiring, if you're developing, if you're trying to retain people. But then on the flip side, from a firm perspective, what do? You deliver projects. So if you can't manage and deliver projects effectively, your firm is not going to grow, period, right? It's like going to a coffee shop, but they're just not good at coffee, right? This doesn't make sense. So it makes sense for you to invest in your leaders and your project managers because they're driving the profitability of your company, number 1. But then on the flip side, for them, they see that as their career path to being successful in the industry. So to me, it's kind of a win-win for both the individual and the firm, which is why we're big proponents of really investing in your project management and kind of getting back to what you said earlier, not just investing in the training, but investing in consistent practices across your organization where your leaders can be really bought into it. And create like a PM culture, if you will.
So if folks want to find out more information about the Engineering Management Institute, where can they do that?
Just go to our website, engineeringmanagementinstitute.org. You can also connect with me, Anthony Fasano, on LinkedIn. We have a lot of free resources out there that we're proud of. 10 podcasts, like Civil Engineering Podcast, AEC Project Management Podcast. We also have 2 YouTube channels on how to pass the FE exam and the PE exam. So if you're a firm leader and you got a lot of people trying to get their license, those are just free videos that we've been doing for years that have helped a lot of people get their license. So definitely take advantage of all the content we have. Again, it's engineeringmanagementinstitute.org.
This has been really interesting. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Allison. I appreciate it.
This is another episode of the Engineering Influence Podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies. Thanks so much.